Welcome, everybody, this week to the Damage Per Second podcast. I'm your host, Jay Borino, and this week we're going to be talking about Star Wars. So if you haven't seen it and want to avoid spoilers, we're going to be just fully... Everything's off limits. Or, wait, on limits. Everything's fair game. That's what I was thinking. So if you don't want to be spoiled by anything, then leave now. You've been warned. Brett has not seen the movie yet, so he is not here. We're instead joined by Keith and his wife, Jen.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
So...
What's this show called?
It's the Damage Per Second podcast. It's week number 92, right? Which is pretty cool. We've made it that many weeks. But anyway, we're talking about Star Wars this week, The Last Jedi. And the fan response has been divisive, I suppose, is how I would describe it. Yeah, to say the least. So I have a lot to say, mostly about the crazy reactions, to be honest. Like, that's kind of what I have a lot to say on. But I'd like to hear... Let's just talk about the film. I guess maybe we just do a bit of a roundtable to say, like, what were the big... What really stood out to you? Like, what were the big yeses and nos of the film? I guess, Keith, if you want to start us out.
Yeah. So we've been, like... So you and I, Justin, and Jen and I have been, like, talking about it a lot. And I've been arguing with a bunch of people on Reddit, of course. So I have to, like, dial it back a little bit and just go back to, like, initial impressions. I really liked it. I loved it. I was really, I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I'd put it up there as probably one of my favorite Star Wars movies. I don't know, maybe my either third or fourth. I don't know if I liked it better than... I'd probably put it at, like, probably 4 for now. But, like, after the original trilogy. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I liked what I really liked about it was the risks that they took. I mean, it was really interesting because The Force Awakens came out and it was like basically fan service the movie in a good way, in a great way, because after the prequels they needed something like that. I think, original trilogy fan service. They brought back a lot of characters. They brought back the practical effects and just the general vibe. Like, John Williams, the score, the practical effects, the worlds, the characters were all really good. And what I liked about The Last Jedi in particular was that every character had their own agency in what they thought was best to do, and they all did it. So that put them into conflict with each other sometimes. I mean, sometimes it just created interesting situations, but... Yeah, I mean, Poe, Rose, Finn, Rey, Kylo, Luke. I mean, obviously, Holdo, the new admiral in the movie, and Princess Leia. All of these characters had their own sort of little, like, plots that they were doing. So I found that really interesting.
Okay. Any, so... If you just had to say, like, one... So you said basically the risk-taking, the fact that it was different, and that the characters all felt realistic in that they were all set apart.
Yeah.
What would you say was the major downside of the film, or was there one?
Yeah, in terms of negatives or criticisms, and you'll see a lot of things online, but, like, taking that many risks, some of them are going to seem... a little odd, in retrospect, or they might not be taken the way that you hope that they're taken. So obviously there's lots of criticisms that you'll see on Reddit, and I don't agree with most of them, but obviously that's like the risk that the director's taking, is that, you don't necessarily want a ton of poor Rotten Tomatoes user scores and things like that, and fans mad at you. In terms of things that I guess didn't necessarily stand out to me when I was watching the movie, but like things after, there's some simple, like, plot holes. Like, someone pointed out how and most of them are pretty justifiable, but, like, pointed out how did Finn pull back Rose's unconscious body through, like, miles of desert in front of all of the Imperials while Luke was fighting Kylo Ren? How did he do that? He drove a speeder for, like, miles out into the desert and then somehow able to drag her back to the Rebel station. I'm like, I can't really argue with that. That's a little silly.
Yeah.
They were all right there the entire time that he was doing this. I don't know how that happens, but somehow he was able to, and in just like the time frame. So that's the one thing that mainly that and I suppose Poe's. What I said I liked was like the movie is all about failure. I didn't mention that, but and learning from your mistakes. So when people point out flaws like, well, why did Rose stop Finn from from sacrificing himself and destroying that big drill? Or why didn't Holdo use Lightspeed and destroy their fleet earlier? Or why didn't there's all kinds of criticisms about people effectively not being like omniscient. But even though I think there's some good reasons why those characters did what they did, if they didn't, the characters are imperfect, and that's what makes them interesting and compelling. They're all learning from their failures. Poe, like sort of a lot of Poe's decisions in this movie, if he didn't do anything, then all of the rebels would still be alive and probably safe on Crate. The Imperials would still have a dreadnought, so that's unfortunate, obviously. They might have done a lot more damage with that. But even after that, with Poe's plan, it was sort of like Poe, Finn, and Rose's plan to go on the ship and destroy this thing, and that's how they found out about Holdo's cloaked ships and things like that. If he hadn't done any of that, all of those throughout the plan probably would have worked fine. But that's kind of what it was about, is everybody's doing their best and trying to do. I think that you're supposed to mistrust Holdo along with Poe at the start, and then you realize like, oh, he's wrong. He's not the perfect, infallible like pilot that we saw in the first movie. He's got some like serious like arrogance issues and things like that, and he's obviously like learning from Leia. So anyway, I guess I'll just say like there's some small little plot holes here and there, as you would expect in a 2.5-hour sci-fi movie that takes a lot of risks. But overall, that's really all I'll criticize it for.
Cool. Okay. Jen, hit us with your thoughts. Similar? Different?
Well, Keith and I have been talking about it a lot, and we've been kind of an echo chamber, so I think we reflect each other's opinions a lot. My favorite thing, honestly, was the fact that they kind of subverted the theme of the first trilogy. Instead of focusing on this battle of good versus evil, they chose to go with more of like it's important to have balance, and light is important with dark. And obviously the most awesome part of the movie was that battle with Rey and Kylo. So awesome. And so I really liked that. I think some people didn't like that direction, but I thought that was a really great way for them to make it different while still having some of the themes from the original. Also, I liked the humor in it. Like some parts were actually funny, not like Jar Jar Binks stepping in. Funny. And just like funny enough to make the characters feel realistic, and like Luke wasn't serious all the time, and that was really nice. And then just the visuals were fucking awesome. I talked about that battle already, which was so cool. But also when they're on the planet, I can't remember the name, where they're going, and there's like the red dust everywhere.
Yeah, that was really cool.
All of that is just gorgeous. Didn't like, what I really didn't like is that I really wanted Captain Phasma to be this awesome badass they built her up to be, and she just fucking loses everything. Everything she does, she fails, and I was so sad.
I think they tried too hard to make her a new Boba Fett.
Yeah.
They're like, they knew from the get-go, they're like, she's gonna have minimal screen time, we just want her to look cool, because it's like Boba Fett. But the whole idea of Boba Fett is, you don't advertise him. He's just there, and everyone's like, oh, he's in a cool suit. And he was inadvertently cool. So when you try really hard to make someone cool, and then you only give them less than 5 minutes of screen time, this is what fucking happens.
Yeah. People are like, what? And there's no way, and I don't know, like, I don't see how she could come back from
She
that?
like fell into a
She
fiery
fell
abyss.
into a
I think
fire
she's
pit.
dead.
They're probably like, oh, we'll have her fall into a pit. And then they're like, no, we should just really emphasize that she's dead. How about she falls into a fire pit?
We have like one combat scene between the two movies, and it's against Finn, and he fucking kills her.
Yep.
It's awful.
And Finn like shouldn't be able to do anything. Like he dropped out of stormtrooper training, and stormtroopers suck. So like he shouldn't be able to do anything. But he just, I mean, I get that she kind of like beat him up, and then he like got the element of surprise, which is maybe like a callback to like it really mirrors that Han Solo Boba Fett thing, where like Boba Fett is a way better fighter than Han Solo, but Han Solo just sort of like uses his wits and
he gets
like,
he doesn't use his wits.
He doesn't
Boba
really.
Fett gets accidentally knocked into a pit by a blind man. That's what people. This kind of. Okay, I will say just from the get-go, I enjoyed the film. I don't think it was the worst Star Wars ever. I don't think it was the worst Star Wars ever by a long shot, and I think it was better than all the prequels by a long shot. I liked it more than Rogue One, and I actually liked it a little bit more than The Force Awakens. But again, that's very much opinion. But that also brings me back to the one point that I really want to make, too, is that people seem to misremember the original movies so much, and so many people talk about nostalgia and all that, but like really think about the original films and like the humor that's in the original films. Oh, I don't like the contextual humor. It feels like it's from, it's 2017 humor. We're in the Star Wars universe. Why are they making these quips? It feels like a Marvel movie. Go and watch the original movies. That amount of humor is in all of them, and it's way worse in the prequels. Way worse. So you can't even compare this to the prequels. But like even the original films, there was dated 70s, early 80s style humor in all of them.
Oh, yeah.
So it drives me crazy when people are like, oh, well, this isn't like Star Wars. If you don't like the film because there's humor, that's one thing. But if you're trying to compare it to the other Star Wars films and say this isn't like Star Wars, that is 100% wrong. That kind of drives me nuts.
Yeah. That's one thing I found is that I'd just been arguing with people on Reddit like way too much about Star Wars. But the one thing is that almost any criticism that people make, you can find an analog for them doing the exact same thing in the prequel. They're like, well, when they go to see Luke, how come he throws his lightsaber over his shoulder? Like, that's just Rian Johnson in a nutshell, like, what his take on the movie is. And, it's just like, he's like crazy and they destroyed his character or something. It's supposed to be like a cool Jedi Master training thing. And I'm like, what about The Empire Strikes Back? Are you kidding? They like, okay, number one, I like this. Star Wars' Facebook page responded to that, and they said, almost as if he'd seen it somewhere before. And they show the scene. I think it's Return of the Jedi when Luke throws his lightsaber over his shoulder. He's on like the bridge of the Death Star, and I get that it's not the same moment, but like, what about The Empire Strikes Back? He goes down to Dagobah expecting some Jedi Master, and at this point, no one knows who Yoda is. They're just Master Yoda. He said Jedi Master. And it's a fucking Muppet out of the Muppet Show. And he's like running around cackling and like beating Luke with his staff. And the point is like he ends up having some like some interesting things to tell. And it's like about Jedi Masters. I mean, subverting expectations and being kind of weird. And I don't know. I even like I know this is very divisive. I like the milk scene. I thought that was fucking hilarious.
I thought that was hilarious. Yeah.
And people online, they were like, it's great because it shows, like, they got the blue milk or green milk or whatever it's supposed to be in the new movie. Like, it shows that it shows, like, kind of his personality, how he, like, just doesn't give a fuck anymore. Like, he's got to survive somehow. And it shows that he's still a farm boy like he was on Tatooine. And I love that.
Can I just say before we get too much further, I just want to address the fact that there is controversy over this film, and because it's Star Wars, some people have gotten crazy, and we've already sort of gotten a little heated about it, and I just want to make clear
I'm getting into the weeds too much already.
Well, there's two sides to this film. You either love it or hate it, or you're kind of in between and you're not sure. And one thing I want to emphasize is the people that love it think that the people that hate it are stupid for hating it, and the people that hate it think that the people that love it are stupid for loving it. And that's probably the most frustrating thing for me to see, is people just talk past each other. And let me just say, anytime we address criticism, it's not towards the people who simply are just like, I don't like this film, I don't really have much else to say, it's a movie, I didn't like it, I'm moving on with my life. It's the people who just go on forums and they don't really justify their own opinions, they just say, this movie was garbage. That's it, that's all they have to say. And likewise, the people who blindly defend it without any real good reason to. So it's like, I like the film, so I will defend it, not in a terse way. So really, anytime that it sounds like we're kind of like getting into it and making fun of people who like, it seemed like you didn't get the film and that's why you didn't like it. I'm not being condescending to every person that doesn't like the film. More so towards the people who just claim they don't like it and don't really have a reason. They can't really communicate why, and they just like are very vocal and like, this is the worst movie of 2017, the worst Star Wars ever. It's worse than the prequels. It sucked, and I'm gonna leave a 0-star rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Like that's crazy.
That's what gets me sucked into it. You know, that's what gets me sucked into the arguments and stuff, is when people, it's just the any sort of, just the exaggeration. You know, I saw things like, oh, Leia's flying scene was, you know, someone on Reddit said that the scene where Leia uses the Force to fly back to the ship, which, like, as I was seeing it, I had mixed emotions. I was like, I know that this is going to get some controversy, but I think it was because of like Leia's music, like they were playing her theme when she was doing it. It was the first time you got to see her like really use the Force. I just felt sort of like powerful to me. And then someone on Reddit was like, it was disrespectful to the memory of Carrie Fisher. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
That's the crazy. Yeah, that kind of shit is crazy.
Like, dude, I'm just glad she didn't die that way. We were really worried that that's how they were going to kill her. And they were just like, oh, we don't know what to do now.
Sucked her. Exactly. They sucked her out of the bridge, and then they just went on to some other action scene. I was like, holy shit, was that it? Like, they're not going to do it. They're not going to even like have a little moment.
Yeah. One thing I will say about that scene with Leia, because that seems to be controversial, and I understand, is I think the idea of it is actually really solid. The execution was what was off. Like, I think if she wasn't, like, there was a scene, she started, her eyes kind of open, and she moves her hand, and you kind of get an idea of what's about to happen. I think at that moment, everyone was okay with it. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I don't think at that moment everyone was like, this is ridiculous. It got ridiculous when the execution of the scene started spiraling into, it looked like she was going like a mile a minute. Like she was like zooming through space. I think the way that the scene was crafted, yeah, they like if she just moved, like they see her body out there, they're like, we should get her, or like she moves herself a little bit, she's moving real slow, and they see her like, oh, she's alive, and they pull her in with like a tractor beam or something. Something that it just didn't look so absurd. Because that is, I will agree, I think the scene looked ridiculous. It was just strange. It wasn't like, oh my god, I hate this. It was just strange. And that's why I think they could have probably done that differently.
I think part of it was that whenever you see a Jedi using the Force to move things or move themselves, they're either doing like a jump off of something or they're pulling something to them, and it just looks a little bit more subtle. Whereas because they were in space, there's nothing to go like to push off of or pull, so it ends up just sort of like looking like I don't know, like Flight of the Valkyries or something like that, with like the billowing behind her. And I think that if it was a little bit more subtle, because I think it started off so well with the music and like the eyes opening and like the hand moving a little bit. I think in the music, I think it started off so well. And I don't know, what the answer is, but I think like visually they could have modified it just slightly, and I think it wouldn't have gotten as much criticism.
I completely agree. Yeah, it was just like the smallest thing, and I wonder if they're going to look back on that and regret how they filmed it, I think. I don't know. I mean, what do I know? But clearly it's not getting the best reception. I think my favorite part of the film, not scene-wise, but in terms of like an underlying theme, is I felt it was a meta theme of excessive hero worship, and by extension, nostalgia and the original trilogy. Because I think one of the biggest criticisms this film is getting, and this is what makes me think, I feel like you weren't watching the same film I was, or like you didn't get it, or simply the film wasn't good enough to execute on this idea, to convey it to people who were watching it. But Luke Skywalker's character is ruined. I think the whole point of the film is the fact that the way he turned out the way he was. He even says, he's like, oh, I was the great Luke Skywalker. You know, like, I couldn't fail because I was, like, he's saying it mockingly as if to say, like, people worshipped me because I'm supposedly a hero, and guess what? I fucked up, and that pressure was too much, and so I left. And like, the pressure was too much, and guess what? I couldn't hack it, and I failed my nephew, and then it went poorly, and I had to leave. Like, that was very clearly communicated in the film. It wasn't like an oversight that they accidentally left out and it was like, oh, you ruined Luke Skywalker because you wrote him wrong. Like, it was very clearly explained. Yeah, that was the very point of his role in the film.
Yeah, I think that, and I liked it because they acknowledged, I mean, for all of these characters, they had to do something, like, to a certain extent, where they had to acknowledge that 40 years has gone by for these characters.
Yeah.
And so they had to, like, change them in some way. And I really liked, because they acknowledged that Luke at some point was, like, the Luke Skywalker that everybody imagined in their mind. He was a Jedi Master trained, like, he was Master Skywalker at a Jedi temple training a bunch of students, which if you've ever read the extended universe, if you've, like, played games, Jedi Academy, then that's like the, you know, picture of adult Luke Skywalker that you have in your mind. And they acknowledge that he existed. But I like that they also acknowledge the fact that, like, also in those stories, the dark side was always like and obviously they're not doing this because of the extended universe, but the dark side was always a constant, like, struggle for Luke and a lot of Jedis. And so I thought that made perfect sense. And I thought that was really interesting. And he immediately regretted it, obviously. And that obviously, I mean, and it affected him so much that he secluded himself. And I thought that was all pretty realistic for what his character would do. And so I liked all that. I liked the cynical Jedi, which is something that, like, a sort of a character that you saw in some of these games, like Knights of the Old Republic. I think they had, like, at least 2, and I think they generally gray Jedis, which Luke was sort of in this movie, where he's not quite like light side, he's not quite dark side, he's kind of separate from it, and it's a rejection of that whole dichotomy. And you see that in Knights of the Old Republic and some of these other games, like cynical Jedi who don't prescribe to these sorts of, like, this sort of mythos, and so I liked that.
Yeah, it all comes back to balance. It all comes back to shades of gray.
Yeah.
It's not, you can't just be all light and all dark. And even these heroes you worshipped as a kid, they can't be like that. He went all Dumbledore on us, I think.
And I mean, beyond that too, it's like the us as an audience, us as a cultural consumer of media has evolved since the 70s. In the 70s, it's very much a hero's journey, and that was meant to mimic kind of the action tales from the 30s, like Flash Gordon. That's what George Lucas drew inspiration from. We're in a different age of media now where you can't keep doing the same, like, well, the Jedi are good and the Sith are bad, and we've got a new Jedi and we've got a new Sith, and they just get trained by the same people from the 70s films. So they had to do something. And again, I admit that the execution may not have really been there in certain cases, because I see some themes there. I've seen the film twice as well. And if other people didn't see them, I don't think it's necessarily because they're stupid. I think it's because the film didn't execute them properly enough to convey them to everybody.
Exactly.
I can admit that.
Yeah, I think that's really good to acknowledge, is that, like, if in certain places, like, I think in some places that sort of message was really clear, and I think in other, because you see it over and over again, like with so I mean, you see it with Luke, but you also see it with Snoke, sort of like subverting that, because you expect him to be some big evil, and you want to find out more about him and where he comes from and why he's, you know, and if he's probably, like, super powerful, and he just gets killed by Kylo because he's doing his own thing, and he's rejecting all of that and trying to kind of go his own way.
That was quite
I think
surprising.
Everybody agrees Kylo was really, really good.
Oh my God, Adam Driver stole the show. Yeah, he's the best part of these new films, in my opinion.
Super interesting, I think. Like, yeah, Rey and and Adam Driver. And like Jen said, that scene, the battle scene, was so awesome. And you know, I tend to think like I don't really care about action anymore. Like I don't go see action movies and I don't really care. And then I see moments like the fight between like Rey and Kylo and the Red Guard, and I see Holdo going light speed ramming the fleet, and it just like happens in an instant, and then you just see like sparkling fragments of all these ships, and I'm just like, oh my god.
The cinematography was
it's like
really
the most
good.
Incredible thing I've ever seen. Yeah. But anyway, just back to it, like as far as like subverting your expectations and rejection of that like mythos, like you see that with Snoke, you see it with Luke, you see it with Rey. You expect her to have I heard that was like a big, people are like, no, I don't, you know, we're gonna sure, yeah, she's just an orphan and her parents are just like junkies, like, all right, we'll find out in the next movie. Like, no, you're not, that's who her parents are. That's the point, is that she doesn't come from, she's not just like Rey Skywalker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're expanding this universe, and that's another thing you see them trying to do, is expand it a little bit. It's bigger than Empire versus Sith, Skywalker, and Skywalker is the only Jedi family. And you see that with the orphan that they show being force sensitive at the end of the movie. I mean, although it wasn't necessarily like the best executed, you see that kind of with the Casino Planet, and I think Benicio del Toro's character, about him just saying like, oh yeah, I mean, you guys are like, both sides are kind of, you know, have black marks. It's, you know, the rebels aren't totally good. These same arms dealers are selling to the rebels. I just think that I don't know, I really like that message.
I like Benicio del Toro as well. When I rewatched the film, a lot of people didn't like the casino subplot, and I initially didn't either. I felt it was superfluous and unneeded. And when I rewatched it, I actually came to the opposite conclusion. There really was not a lot of runtime dedicated to the casino, which I think is why it wasn't very good. It needed more time to be fleshed out, but the movie was already kind of bloated. And so from that perspective, maybe they should have just left it out entirely. But it's, interestingly enough, it really did not feel very long when I watched the film a second time. It was actually quite short, which really surprised me. But I thought Benicio del Toro was great, and I think that was an idea that I wish that it would have been separated out, because it's like the movie tried to tackle a lot at once, like the hero worship and theme of failure. I think they like that was enough, but then the whole like arms dealer thing I like, but it was like too much on top of a film that was already trying to accomplish a lot, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that parts of that could have been executed a little bit better. They have a lot to juggle, and I think, you know, in some ways you can see that it had a purpose in terms of establishing, like making the universe seem a little bit larger, establishing these shades of gray between the Empire and the Rebels, having the characters learn something. But obviously, and I wonder if it was similar for other people. At the time, I enjoyed all of that stuff. It was only in retrospect where I was like, oh yeah, I guess they didn't need to go there at all. You know what I mean? I like seeing new world, like Star Wars worlds and things like that. I enjoy it. And when I'm at a Star Wars movie, I'm just sort of strapped in for the ride. It was long, but even by the end, I mean, I wasn't excited for the movie to end. I was like, you know, whatever you want to show me, I'm gonna
yeah,
I'm ready for it. But in retrospect, it was one of those things where it's obviously like, okay, they need something for Finn and Rose and Poe to do. They need, I mean, Poe, I guess, wasn't there, but they need something for Finn and Rose to do. It was sort of like it's not boondoggle, but whatever that TV trope, movie trope is, where they have to go find there's some MacGuffin, yeah. It was like sort of like that, hey, we got to go find the code breaker and he'll lead us to this thing, and it's like just this long journey that they a plot device that takes them around all these places they want to go. So in retrospect, yeah, you know, but I don't think the movie suffered too much from it. Mm-hmm. Did anybody else think it was going to be Lando when they're like a code breaker and he's on a casino planet and blah, blah, blah?
admittedly didn't even consider it, only because I don't think the last I'd heard of Billy D. Williams is that he's not in great health. So I imagine they weren't going to bring him back, but that's, that's kind of a fourth wall issue, not in universe.
Gotcha.
I just want to bring up one of my favorite parts of the movie is when Poe meets Rey. Because I was like, oh, y'all have been friends this whole time. You were all hanging out in the first movie. And I'm like, oh my God, no, they never actually met.
Oscar Isaac just has he just has great chemistry with any person that's on the screen with him at the same time.
I know. That was hilarious. It reminded me of, well, yeah, it was just like, you think you're just like, oh yeah, Poe and, and Finn and Rey, they're the dynamic trio. They're going around doing all two of them had never met each other. But it reminded me of Arrested Development. So they have the first 3 seasons, and then season 4 comes out, and at one point, Michael is talking to George Michael, and he's saying like, oh yeah, Lucille Ostero, she's got this big scheme to buy up the Bluth Company, and George Michael's like, wait, who? He's like, Lucille Ostero, Gam Gam's is her best friend. No, I don't know who that person is.
He never met, yeah.
And it turns out the 2 characters had never met.
I was just reading in the chat, someone was pointing out the forced quote romance with Finn and Rose, and I don't really think there was any. Like, she gave him a weird goofy kiss at the end, but like there wasn't a romance plot, I didn't feel like. One of the complaints from some people, not everybody, in The Force Awakens was it was too sterilized. There was no romance. There was no sex, like even just like PG sex. There's nothing. It was just everybody hugs and they're just friends, because Rey's got to be the heroine who doesn't need a man. And people complained about that, which I think is a silly thing to complain about. But then in this movie, they're like, fine, we'll shoe in some romance. And then everybody hates that now too. So it's like, God damn it, man, you never please. You can't please everyone, obviously. But it's like a silly complaints, I think, on both ends. It's just let it happen or not.
Both movies very erratic.
I don't know. We'll see how it plays out in the next movie. Like, I think in this movie, it could have just been like a friend kiss or something.
Right.
I'm just worried they're like setting up Rey and Finn. I just hope they don't try to do like a love triangle thing because they're like young, cute actors. Otherwise, I'll be happy. But I don't want that to happen.
And then in the 3rd movie, they drop the bomb, and it's like, you're all siblings.
All 3 of them are siblings, yeah. We don't know how. Oh, that would be nuts. What are you guys' thoughts on just the overall community reaction? Do you think it's going to change, or do you think it's just going to be a divisive film?
I think it's going to change. I think it's already... I mean, I don't know. You mentioned that you thought maybe it was already kind of changing, and that's the impression that I got too. It seems like the initial response is vitriol, which is interesting because I'm always the opposite, where like I come out of a movie and I'm like, wow, that was awesome. Like, I love that movie. And then later I'm like, okay, there was some flaws in it. But I don't relate to that experience of seeing a movie and hating it and then coming out and being like, actually, it was good. Like,
I've never gone through that
I don't
either.
relate to that, but it does seem to be the way it's working. But that might just be a symptom of the immense, like, rabid fans go out midnight, they see it, they come out, and they give it shitty reviews. And then everybody else goes and sees it, and they're like, actually, that movie's great. But I think that it's a travesty that anyone is saying that it's worse than the prequels, because any criticism that you lob at The Last Jedi is just happens 100-fold in the prequels. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
If you're talking about, like, people were complaining about that one piece of cheesy dialogue that Rose said to Finn, like, we fight for what we love, and saying that somehow made it a worse movie. And whatever your opinions are on that, look at the prequels. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, people just, I don't know. People just explaining what they think. Like, the prequels, it's a travesty that this is lower than any of the prequels, let alone all of the prequels in terms of user score. But I mean, that's just my opinion.
I think people genuinely didn't like the film, but I think that the scores will even out. If you look on what's it called, like Cinema Score or something like that, it's one of those that actually polls people at the theater, as opposed to
that's interesting.
Like just user reviews, because I don't want to be the guy that's like, oh, all the user reviews are botted, because they're not. But because I'm acknowledging people definitely did not like this film, but there's definitely there's got to be some botted reviews, because the user score is at like 50, 55 right now. And then if you go on CinemaScore, which just uses polling, which they've been doing for decades, it has an A, and The Force Awakens has an A. But apparently on Rotten Tomatoes, the user score is like 56. So it doesn't really line up. And I'm not saying, oh, all the views are botted. It's a conspiracy by Disney to create a controversy to get more media attention, which actually would be really awesome if they did that. I mean, smart, I should say, not awesome. But yeah, I don't think the film is as polarizing as it seems. But we'll find out in a couple weeks, I suppose, when everyone forgets and goes back to their normal life.
I don't really get people who their gut reaction is to like hate something new from something they love. I think that's silly. I've never had that kind of reaction. I don't know.
I mean, I didn't like the prequels, but it was just sort of like, these are, I just
but
thought
they were,
like
bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just thought like, oh, these are weird. I don't really like them. And then I moved on with my life, and I'll talk about them, but I will not consistently post online over and over and over again, you know? It's just, it becomes absurd.
It's like the thing about the prequels is you enjoy them. They're one of those movies that you enjoy. And if you, it's hard to look at them in the context of everything else rather than the context of Star Wars. But if you compare them to like any other movie, you're like, wow, these movies. I firmly believe if you compared the prequels to like other movies in their genre, like they're probably pretty good, just in terms of like what you're getting for. No one's like seeing the Fast and the Furious or something and criticizing them for like, oh, there's a dumb plot. Like, you know what I mean?
Surprise,
stupid.
surprise.
It didn't make any sense. They have to steal all these cars. Why? Like, no one's doing that. But I think that you can enjoy them for what they are. But if you compare them to like the original trilogy in the context of that, or even the new movies, like the dialogue is just it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like I was like talking to people in the chat. Like obviously the biggest thing is like that the romance like between Amidala and Padme and Anakin, where it's just like, I hate sand. It's rough and coarse and it gets everywhere. Not like you. and like I don't know. Like I love you so much I can't see. Oh, so love has blinded you. And then later like the Sith are evil, Anakin. From my perspective, the Jedis are the ones that are evil. Yeah, we got that. You didn't have to tell us.
We figured it out when you murdered all those people and your eyes are yellow and you look mean. We figured you didn't like those Jedi guys. We figured
really
it.
Silly. But it's cool because it takes you to new worlds in Star Wars and the scenes, the lightsaber battles. They've got amazing real choreography. All of these like actors train like crazy, and you enjoy them. But I don't know. Yeah, it just like scored purely like as a movie, with a plot and stuff. I think that
they don't hold up very well. I mean, the other thing too is they were cutting edge visually for their time, but they're not anymore. So they just don't really hold up to time. And now everyone just says, oh well, they were world building, which I mean. The original trilogy was not really known. It was very limited in scope. And then we're like, well, we're going to world build, but every other piece of these films is technically bad. Like the writing and narration and the way that the dialogue is presented is like embarrassingly poor. But you know what? No, but you know what? They introduced some new stuff, so, we like it now. I don't know. It's just weird the past couple of years that people are like, oh, I think the prequels are good. Like, I'm not trying to, like, beat the shit out of people that like the prequels, mind you. I'm just saying, like, it's just weird that people try to apologize for them, when it's just like, again, you either like or dislike the movie. That is the beginning and end of that story. I did not like the prequels. I'm done talking about it unless someone wants to talk to me about it specifically. I'm not going to go out of my way to argue about the prequels. I just don't understand. And people will go out of their way to apologize for the prequels. I don't know. It's just bizarre to me. The whole... It's like Star Wars specifically, and a lot of the superhero subcultures are like that too. It's very strange.
Yeah. Does this make you want to play Battlefront?
No, no, definitely not.
Trying to decide if, like, at this point, if there'd be any point where I'd buy that game. I really do want a Star Wars game, like an adventure game, or like...
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I would do that. I like fondly look back. I mean, I never played Star Wars Galaxies, and I look back at, like, from what I heard, like our friend Sam tell us, just the like rose-colored glasses. Because it was, you know, it was probably just a shitty MMO. Pre-WoW MMO wasn't very good, but I just like the idea that, you know, like in this MMO, like 0.01% of people were Jedi, and it was just like some combination of randomness. Like, and they'd just be like, hey, like you have to level a character up, so you can't just spawn tons of characters. You have to level them up and say like, oh, hey, your character's force sensitive. Lucky dog.
Yeah.
And then you become a Jedi, and, you know, bounty hunters try to hunt you, and I'm like, that's fucking cool. That's just like what, you know, and you could, the worlds are all really big, and you could go around and make settlements, and it's just like that feeling of just being in the Star Wars universe, and I think that's a lot of what I get from these movies.
I agree.
What'd you think of Holdo?
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. I think Laura Dern was the one part of the film that was flat for me. Not because I didn't like the character, but I just don't think she was casted well. Because Laura Dern is a great actress. I just didn't like her performance, to be honest. Like, as if I can talk, I'm not an actor, but I'm just saying, like, as a viewer, I just didn't find her acting believable. And I think the whole point was that you weren't supposed to agree with her. Like, you're supposed to subconsciously agree with Poe. Like, yeah, who's this bitch? Like, no, I don't want to listen to what she has to say because she doesn't seem qualified. I think that was the point, but there were just little things about her. I just didn't like her performance. Like, you could have conveyed like a less, like a basically an incompetent or seemingly, you know, someone with low self-confidence, someone who isn't really sure what they're doing, and I just didn't get that from her. I just got kind of an awkward performance. I don't know.
Yeah, so I felt the same way, and like I agree. And it's the kind of thing where it's like in retrospect, I'm supposed to think I'm supposed to, like, you know, mistrust her along with Poe. But I don't know. I think, like, yeah, it's one of those things where, like, if that was made to a lot of the audience, if they didn't have that revelation, like, oh, you know, and I guess everybody did, like, you know, eventually, because they're like, oh, she was actually right. She had a plan and she sacrificed herself. But yeah, I don't know. I just felt it was a little bit weird casting. She is a great actress, and I don't know what it was.
Yeah, I just
some
didn't.
people
I just
online
didn't
were
like
saying,
her. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe it was the purple hair or something.
I feel bad because I genuinely can't explain it, which is not a good look.
Either.
But it just did not strike me as the right way to portray whatever character they were trying to go for. Because I think I get what it was supposed to be, and she just didn't. And especially when I rewatched it, it just kind of felt weird to me. I don't know, like, especially at the end, and she's like, her and Leia say, "May the Force be with you" at the same time. It was just real hammy. I don't know. But I mean, Star Wars is hammy in general, so I can't really complain about that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's like kind of the point, is like you're supposed to see her and be like, oh, it's like she's, you know, flighty and indecisive because she's not doing anything and getting destroyed, and
yeah,
you're just supposed to think, and then it turns out that she's got a plan or something. Maybe that's part of the design of it. People on Reddit were saying it would be better if Akbar did the like suicide run and stuff, and I agree. I think that would have been really cool. But if Poe was arguing with Admiral Akbar about like strategy, anybody who knew who Akbar was would just be like, "Shut up, Poe! You don't know what the fuck you're talking about."
Exactly. Yeah, they needed someone that the audience was. You weren't supposed to like him as the audience. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I agree.
So, but yeah, I mean, I liked what you told me about Rian Johnson. He was like talking about it.
Yeah, somebody asked him. They're like, "Why did you have to kill Akbar at the first Q&A after the film?" He just shrugged. He's like, "Sorry, man." He's like, "I had to kill somebody there," and he was there. The bridge had to go out, and he was there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I thought that was funny, but
yeah. One thing that like, if we're talking about like, and they were minor, just like minor criticisms that I don't think really affected my enjoyment. It's interesting hearing what like stood out to other people, because the things that stood out to me were that like Poe should have been in prison. Like he mutinied against not only did he like disobey times, and then he openly mutinied, and then they get down to Crate, and then he's like, "Oh, we got to do something," and then Leia goes like, "What are you guys looking at me for? Follow him." And I'm thinking like, don't follow him. Everybody who's followed in this movie has died.
Yeah.
He should be in prison. So that's the one thing. That's one thing that stood out to me. The other thing is, I really liked how Kylo killed Snoke. I wish, similar to the Leia thing, visually, they executed it slightly different. I don't like that they, what's the term? They like signaled that they were doing it ahead of time. He's like, I can see him turning the lightsaber towards his target right now.
Yeah.
I thought that was laying it on just a little too thick.
I think that was for
wish
kids.
It had just been spur of the moment, and then you realize like, oh shit, you know.
I hate to fall back on the "it's for kids" excuse, but I think in that particular instance, that was meant to be like, hey kids, this is about to happen. There's about to be some graphic violence for a child. You know what I mean? I don't know. Again, I don't like to fall back on that excuse,
but I wish that it was just like they did it almost exactly the same, but maybe you don't see the lightsaber next to Snoke turning.
Yeah.
Maybe his dialogue is just slightly different. But I mean, these are all very minor things, and they really didn't affect my enjoyment of the movie at all.
This may be a rumor. Someone can correct me, but I swear I had read about this at one point. So during the filming of A New Hope, Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford are filming the scene when and Carrie Fisher, they're all down in the trash compactor. And Mark Hamill at one point goes, they're going on to the next scene, and Mark Hamill is like, "Hey, shouldn't our hair be wet? Because we just came out of the sewer, our hair was wet. Like, shouldn't it still be wet?" You know, like basically mirroring like a lot of pedantic type criticism. And then Harrison Ford just taps him on the back and just goes, "It's not that kind of movie, kid." And that's just how I respond to, and I mean, even if that's not true, Star Wars is not that kind of movie. Like, oh, why do the bombs drop in space? There's no gravity in space. Like, is that really what's going to take you out of this film?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Make something up. They're magnets. I don't know. Like, heaven forbid you were taken out of the film for a split second. I don't know. Those kind of pedantic criticisms really bother me. Like, these films are not meant to be some scientific wonder that is supposed to be 100% accurate. If they can hyperspace through other ships, why don't they just do that all the time? I mean, I guess, but why is that really something that that's gonna change your score of the film from a 5 to a 4? I just don't get that.
Yeah. Not only that, how are these guys flying around and shooting the lasers?
Yeah.
When the lightsabers go on indefinitely, if it was real, just stop.
But again, anytime someone makes that argument, or you think of that, just imagine Harrison Ford just going, "It's not that kind of movie, kid." It's absolutely true.
I want Neil deGrasse Tyson to like put out one of his like little like science movie reviews, and he below the star and then they have like Harrison Ford come up and he's like, "Hey, it's not that kind of movie, kid."
Did you see the last one where they sucked a sun into a small planet and then shot it back out? Because that happened, but you're mad about magnetic mines. I don't...
That's great.
I really enjoyed. I quite liked how Mark Hamill. A lot of the things people were mad about when they said like the humor wasn't fitting for Luke, and that's fine if you felt that kind of took you away from his character. That's absolutely fine. But anytime that Luke Skywalker made a weird joke, my initial thought was it's just like pure Mark Hamill, like the weird shoulder brush thing that he did. Even if that fell flat for you, I'm just like, that was Mark Hamill. He chose to do that, and that is Mark. I don't know. He's a treasure.
Yeah, it seemed like they let him insert more of his personality in this one.
Yeah, which is great, because I love Mark Hamill. And I don't know. I felt like people said like, oh, I felt like it was too much Mark Hamill and not enough. And I mean, I agree to a certain extent. Like the Luke Skywalker we saw when he was in his 20s was like extremely idealistic, you know, above all else. Like, you know, Rey kind of trusted that there was good in Kylo, and she had a lot of faith in the rebellion and the Jedi and that kind of thing. And you know, Luke was a little bit more cynical as he's older, but that also happens to people. You know, so they get a little bit more cynical. They're idealistic when they're young. Well, they had to change these characters in some ways, and I'm glad they did. And you know, so it could have gone any number of ways. I'm glad that you know, Luke had an element of Mark Hamill in it. I thought Mark Hamill was a great actor, by the way. I thought that he was, as far as his acting went, I thought it was fantastic.
Oh yeah, I think it's the best live action he's ever done, because I mean, you look back at the originals, he's really not. I mean, he's not that compelling of a performer, but now he's incredible.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to go to Tashi Station and pick up some power converters.
Oh, it's the best.
Yeesh.
Ooh,
I don't know.
What do you think about? What were we gonna say?
I was just gonna say, I just going to rewind again to emphasize that we're mostly just responding to criticism that I hear from people that are very flippant about it. Like anybody, if you just come away and you're like, I didn't really care for that film, and that's where it starts and ends, I respect that 100%. I'm not trying to like prove you wrong.
Yeah. It's sure classic. Just post in the chat. I am a Jedi like my father before me.
Very wooden, yeah.
And wow, so like as far as like big moments that stand out to me, like the Lightspeed thing was amazing. The I actually did feel in the moment, like I felt like that, like Leia going back to the ship. I had very mixed feelings, but it felt like a little bit powerful. But that's what John Williams can do to you, you know, with his music. And I loved Lightspeed. The duel was amazing. Like when she like throws him the saber, and like just that it was like such a struggle. You know what I mean? That it was so primal's a weird word. I don't know, but like it was so messy and not perfectly choreographed like the lightsaber duels in the prequels, and it was just like someone's got is choking Rey, and then she kind of like twists around and comes up the back and like slices him in half, like part way, not a clean cut, just part way, and then like throws her saber to Kylo, and just that like was just like people just gasped.
Yeah.
In the theater. That was amazing.
There's very creative ways to implement lightsaber fights, and that's what I think. That's what I liked about lightsaber fights. Like the choreography of the prequels is amazing, but I also just sort of like people just desperately trying to beat the shit out of each other with lightsabers. Like they're just imagine they're a sword, and these people don't have magic powers. It's just people trying to beat the shit out of each other, and that's what like the Force Awakens lightsaber in the woods scene. Very simple, but very powerful because there's actual emotion behind it, and I just think it's so much better than all those like hugely choreographed fights.
Yeah, I thought that was done so well, and Kylo's like fighting style is really, really cool.
Yeah.
He's just sort of like hunched over and like I don't know, practically like dragging the thing on the ground. I don't know. It just sort of evokes more of like a claymore type sword instead of like a lightsaber or something. But
oh my god! And when I rewatched it, the other thing I noticed is Daisy Ridley, during that fight, and during a couple other points too, when she's fighting people, she is just screaming like a lunatic. Like, she is, like, screaming in rage. It's actually really, really enjoyable to watch. She's just like, "Bah!"
Just, like, super believable. I gotta watch it. I'm sure my family's gonna watch it. So, and then the last thing that I really enjoyed was I really loved Luke's fight with Kylo, and the fact that it was just like it was just that it was like a Jedi mind trick, like, the entire time. It made so much sense in retrospect, and it was, and I did not see it coming. I don't know if any of you guys did, but I did not see it coming at all. I just thought, like, oh wow, they're escalating it. Like, oh my god, like, geez, like Luke just takes all this blaster fire, and nothing happens. They're just like, I was like, oh, this is kind of silly, but.
I knew something was up, but I didn't know what. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew something was weird just because we saw the lightsaber get broken in 2 pieces like 15 minutes prior.
Oh, I didn't.
So that's why I was like, "There's no." And also, I'm like, "Motherfucker stopped and trimmed his beard and dyed his hair before he showed up." Like, I knew something was weird, but I could not really put my finger on what was happening.
But there's just so much in that moment, like someone on Reddit put it really well, and he's just like, and people are like somehow complaining about the single. I don't want to say it in that perspective, like I'm like making fun of someone, but like I'll just say it was like the single most appropriate use of the Force ever, possibly. Like it perfectly fit in with his character at this point. He's neutral. He doesn't totally want to get involved, but he will. Like he has enough hope that he will get involved, at least to this extent, but he's not going to fight anybody. He's not going to kill anyone. He's not going to show up there, but he's preventing a conflict. And it's still an extremely powerful use of the Force that we've never seen before, but totally fits with how we know the Force can be used. I just thought it was really awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was well done.
And everything in terms of like, I mean, like you were saying, he comes back and he is like how everybody thought, Luke Skywalker was. Like, oh, amazing, Jedi Master. He's like Jedi Master Luke. He looks different. He's got, haircut and beard, and he's wearing the Jedi robes, and he's got the blue lightsaber. Yeah, he just plays into like the concept, the perception of Jedi Masters. It was really awesome.
Oh yeah.
And it was really good as a scene because it shows how Kylo's emotions will get the best of him. How easily manipulated he is. Like, he emptied all the fucking ammo on this illusion of Luke Skywalker.
Super
I think
troll.
that will play into future movies. Sure.
Well, okay, so okay, I guess one of the final pieces of the film, and this is what I find to be the biggest negative of the film, I would say slightly ahead of Laura Dern, is I can't say that I'm not like anticipating the next movie. Like, I don't even know what it would be. Yeah. Like, I like all the characters, I like where they're at, but I have nothing to speculate on. I have nothing that I really care to consider, like what could happen next. I don't know. I just don't. I don't want to say that I don't care, but in a way I don't. Like, I'm not really actively thinking like, ooh, what's gonna happen? So
I agree, and there's not that many. I think there's that many like big questions waiting to be answered. It's J.J. Abrams, which he's a great director. He's a great producer. Someone said that he's like. Someone mentioned, and this was their opinion on Reddit, that he was a really, really good producer, but not necessarily a particularly creative director. And you'll see that a lot with his movies, like Super 8 and the Star Trek movies and The Force Awakens. You'll have a lot of fan service in there. It's going to be like an amazing spectacle. Like, he does everything super well in terms of props and effects and everything. Like, just, there couldn't be enough attention or detail paid to these things. So every movie that he puts out is going to be good. But there might not be that much like creativity or risk taking, is maybe a better way to put it, in terms of the storytelling. And considering the fact that it's sort of set up right now, you're like, all right, we've got a big bad big like villain in Kylo Ren. We've got a Jedi hero in Rey, and there'll probably be some, major space battle. The Empire will come up with another threat, and it might just be like, Return of the Jedi. It might be, has her going and she's trying to persuade him because I feel like he's gonna turn, but I don't know in what way. I don't know in what way. Is he just gonna go and like kill Hux? Like, is Hux gonna be the big bad? That
I kind of hope he doesn't turn.
Sucks.
I don't know. I personally don't.
I don't know. I like him a lot, and like I think there could be an interesting way. I hope there's an interesting way they can do it, but it's I can't necessarily think of think of how it's going to happen.
Yeah, again, he's got a lot of work ahead of him. That's going to be tricky. I don't know. I guess, like, imagine Jedi, but like a fully fleshed out film. Like, it's because Jedi has some failings, I think, where like it's like there's like an hour and a half. There's like an hour to an hour and a half of great film in Jedi, and then the rest is just like weird filler. I don't know. Just imagine Jedi like without Ewoks and a shorter Jabba sequence, and you probably have like a really solid film.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to remember like how much information. And there are definitely some things that need to be. Okay, we got to rescue Han. We got to I assume that they're gonna challenge Vader. Empire. Okay, the Emperor. He exists. So there was some stuff there. And there wasn't really that much more, I think, going from Empire to Jedi than there is going from this movie into whatever the third one is, because there were a lot of questions waiting to be answered from The Force Awakens to The Last Jedi, but I think they could they could still come up with a lot of new stuff. It's going to be interesting to see like twists and threats. It'll just be interesting to see how the characters play into it. If Snoke was alive, I think everyone would have a pretty good idea of how it would go, although it might mirror Jedi too much, because it'd be like, okay, well, obviously, like, Kylo is going to betray Snoke, and she's going to, like, persuade him to come to the light side.
Right.
But that would be way too close to the Return of the Jedi, so... Yeah.
I guess.
Hopefully, I'm sure they got a lot more in the bag.
Well, that's the thing. In a way, like I'm happy that I can't anticipate it, but they didn't really leave any string to follow.
Yeah.
They didn't really leave. They didn't give you those breadcrumbs, which is why I'm just like, what the hell? It could possibly be next at this point. Nobody knows because it's really up in the air. But I don't know. I kind of like the idea that Kylo is just in control now and he's really volatile. But the other thing too is that there's like the stakes, like what is at stake? It's not really defined. Like what is really at stake here? Nobody knows. There's like a New Republic that's been destroyed, but the rest of the galaxy just like is doing nothing throughout all of this. Like it's very unclear what's happening. And in the original Star Wars, it was easy because it visually was like you could tell from the opening sequence. Big Star Destroyer, little ship, like who's the bad guy, who's the authority figure that needs to be taken down. Whereas now it's like, well, the First Order was like a terrorist group, but now they control the galaxy somehow after like a week. It's very unclear. And then I'm kind of going against my own thing here about like the pedantry and getting into like the pedantics of it, but I think that's actually a very important thing to understand that is just inexplicable at this point. I don't know.
Yeah, because they blew up a solar system, which was obviously like major, but like, was it Coruscant that they blew up, or was it some other?
It was a Hosnian Prime, which is where the Republican seat of power was. Yeah.
Sure it is.
Yeah, exactly.
so yeah, they blew up. So it was obviously a big deal. It was a seat of power, but like. Like the galaxy's supposed to be bigger than this. Like,
yeah, exactly. You'd expect
it's all
more.
Under the Republic's control, the First Order should be like, if you destroy, or was the Empire just not totally destroyed? And if not, like, what have they been doing for this?
Right.
For 40 years, and
I think
It was a little confusing. It was like our side has to be the underdogs again, so we're just gonna say like, oh well, now it's the Resistance and the First Order instead of the Rebellion and the Empire. But the First Order just seems to have seemingly limitless resources and like a huge, like way more ships under their command for some reason, and that's just a little confusing to me. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's like I think ultimately though, it's not like I'm asking for a huge amount of explanation. I think just like the most minor amount of exposition would be enough.
Maybe they left the, I don't know, they left the galaxy or fucking something.
Yeah, there's just nothing. There's literally
they went to the outer
nothing.
rim and they've rebuilt. They've spent the entire last 40 years just like spending on military and like farming out these crazy things, and now they came attacking the galaxy. Like that would be sufficient.
Right, it would only take a couple seconds, whereas something like Snoke's backstory has a lot more consequence to have to try to explain, in my opinion. And also, it's kind of the point of the film to not explain it because of Kylo's character. Whereas, like, the state of the galaxy is sort of instrumental to the film, and the original trilogy very simply did it visually right at the beginning, whereas this, I mean, they needed to do something, and it was
because that's a major
weird
difference at this point in the two series, like the original and this, because at this point in the series, after Empire, well, when did they reveal that they had the second Death Star? At the end of Empire?
No, it was at the beginning of Return of the Jedi.
Okay. Well, because like at least you're like, okay, well, the Empire struck back. Now we take the fight to the Empire and we take them out for good.
Yeah, exactly.
And you kind of knew that was it. I guess that's probably what's going to happen in the next movie. You're like, well, now we only got 24, you got like 2,000 Resistance people, and we're waiting on our reinforcements, but we got to take the battle to them.
Yeah, and it's just sort of like, we had a solid lead, we blew it. What now? Like, that's it. That's like the state of things. And again, I'm not asking. I think it was an overreaction to the prequels with the like, oh well, here's a shit ton of exposition that we don't care about because it's people sitting in large armchairs talking for 5 minutes straight so that we can get to another action scene. Don't do that. But you could very easily incorporate some offhanded comments about like, what the fuck is going on in this world.
It'll all be explained in the title crawl.
Yeah,
in the
right.
third movie. They've nursed their wounds and now they're staging their counterattack on.
Yeah, it could have been one line. It actually would have been a nice little tie-in to the original trilogy, where it was like striking from a hidden base after biding their time for years. The First Order is now, you know, something like that. It could make it cheesy. Like, the opening crawl is the exact time you can pretty much do whatever the fuck you want. You can make it as cheesy and weird as you want, because that's like,
thank God,
pure Star Wars goofiness. I don't know.
We've got pure exposition just built into the formula for these movies.
Right?
You don't have to kid anyone. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. I'm sure they'll come out with some new things. I hope that I'm just sick of like the big space threats, and I know I want space battles, but I want there to be like it better not be like it better not just be like a super weapon that can destroy.
Oh my God. I think they know better at this point, but I don't know.
Yeah. Let's be honest. It was kind of silly in Return of the Jedi.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're building the Death Star again.
I mean, I wonder how eye-rolly it was at the time. Like, anybody who was able to watch it in theaters, the movie opens up, and I think it is I think it's the second Death Star. Like, that is literally the first scene after the title crawl.
Yeah.
And I wonder if everyone's like, oh my God, really?
Yeah, you gotta be kidding me. Now we blew this thing up. But yeah, I really liked. One thing I'll say is that before this movie came out, what I would always say is, I don't like. I always just say like, yeah, the Star Killer base is the one thing. Like, come on, our super weapon, but it's worse than the Death Star. Like, I want them to do something like focus on like force threats or something that are sort of like, you don't really understand them. They're mysterious, and so I think they did that to a certain extent. I mean, I don't think that there's not some huge force threat right now. Kylo Ren, I guess, but they dove into a lot of that with the force on the island that Luke was on, like the dark side and the light side, and just sort of those sequences, and dealt with Snoke a lot, and I really enjoyed that. I'm glad that they went into that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess, so it sounds like from all three of us, we all liked it, at least. Recommend it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Don't be a jerk if someone disagrees with your opinion about the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. There were certain there were definitely certain criticisms that I acknowledge as being valid, but it's not. I think that what happened in this movie wasn't what a lot of people expected, which they probably set out to do, and I ended up enjoying it and I mean, other people didn't like the direction that they took, and obviously, like, that's the crux of taking risks. But yeah, I was just sort of like, when things like that happen, I'm just kind of like, oh, I guess it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I'm excited to see what happens. So we'll see how they wrap it up in 2 years. What about the Han Solo movie? Are you excited for it, or worried about it, or nothing about it?
I'm not worried about it. I guess what this film should teach everybody is temper your expectations. And not only can you just learn that from the fact that the film was a letdown to many people, but also it was actually kind of the theme of the film itself. like it was purposefully trying to say temper your expectations. Things won't always live up to what you expect.
Yeah.
And I don't know I have no idea what to expect from the Solo film. Like, what the hell is the Solo film supposed to be?
It could be anything.
Yeah. So we'll wait and see.
It could be literally anything.
We'll see the trailer, and if the trailer's weird, then I'll be excited about it. But if it's just like, oh, they're flying in the Millennium Falcon and it's going real fast, and they say they're doing the Kessel Run really fast, I'll probably roll my eyes a little bit. And
yeah, it had some issues with, like, the director getting replaced and stuff, but I think that worked out.
Yeah, who is it now? Ron Howard?
Ron Howard, which is interesting. Like, I was looking at this kind of stuff that he did, and he did, like, A Beautiful Mind, Apollo 13. I'm like, what is this gonna be? But he did he's done a lot of comedy too, so I think that's what you can expect. I mean, it's Han Solo, it's Ron Howard. He's done a lot of comedy movies. I mean, he's heavily involved in Arrested Development, although he wasn't, like, Mitch Hurwitz, I think, is the director. I'm not positive, but Ron Howard, I mean, he was the narrator, but he was also really he was an executive producer. So I think that's what you can expect from the Han Solo movies. I think that it's going to be really funny. So I hope they do it well.
I hope so too. I mean, one thing with Han Solo isn't supposed to be like a noble character doing the right thing. I mean, it wasn't until Star Wars that his character supposedly did the right thing and, went back and tried to help people. So I wonder if he's just going to be a huge asshole. And I kind of hope he is.
He's just horrible. Yeah, hopefully he's just, like, bad. Like, oh, that'd be amazing.
Just really mean, and I would love that.
That'd be hilarious. Lando, Donald Glover is Lando. That's interesting.
That's gonna be neat.
Yeah. I bet Han will fuck over Lando to set him up for, like, Lando fucking over Han. And he'll probably win the Millennium Falcon from him. It's probably gonna be part of that movie.
Well, I didn't think, Lando fucked over Han in Empire because Vader showed up and basically forced him to, right? It wasn't like he had a vendetta against him.
Yeah, but they had, like, a sort of a complicated relationship, but, like, probably, like, obviously, like, I don't know.
There's a lot of potential.
There's a lot of history there.
Yeah. We have to make Donald Glover's Lando work because he's a funnier character than we've ever had before.
He's the key to all of this.
Jar Jar is the key to all of this. Well, this was a fun discussion. I hope we were able to fit everything in.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff to talk about. It's very dense. Every single shot has so much going on, It's just...
You know what I'm going to do, and I was just telling Jen, is I'm going to go watch the prequels again, because I'm just excited for more Star Wars. And,
wow.
They're silly, but I haven't watched them in an extremely long time.
I think I thought about that too, and what really solidified my opinion on the prequels is anytime I've thought about going and watching them again, I just think, nah, they're boring. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just my thought is I don't want to watch them because I find them boring, and that's why I just I'm not going to watch them again. And that's why I guess I'm like, well, I guess I didn't like these movies. Like that answered my own question on whether I like the prequels or not.
I enjoyed. Or go ahead.
I was just gonna say I've seen Attack of the Clones, and it was bad, and I tried to watch it again, and I couldn't.
It was bad.
It was very bad.
Yeah.
Is that the worst? People agree that was the worst, or Phantom?
Well, at this point, The Last Jedi has the lowest critical, or not the lowest user scores. So yeah, again, watch Attack of the Clones and ask yourself again if you should rethink your Rotten Tomatoes score if you're someone who gave it a low score.
Yeah, everybody lower your expectations for it. That's what this movie for the people who gave it a 0 on Metacritic or whatever, a half star, then that's what this movie was for, was to lower your expectations, to temper them so that they can come back strong for J.J. Abrams' third movie.
The long con, I guess.
Keep them low.
Keep them very low, yeah.
I don't want to see this again. Third movie comes out, you guys. If they're writing 0 star. I remember I saw one of the reviews that was just, my kids really loved it. My wife and I saw gave it a 3 out of 10. But he put a half star on Metacritic. And I'm like, you just said you gave it a 3 out of 10, and you gave it a half star out of 5. So how does that work?
I don't know.
It's just silly business. Then again, Metacritic probably didn't exist when those, prequels came out, so you probably didn't have people, slamming the site, giving it 1-star reviews. It was only people who, for whatever reason, after the fact, way after they had time to settle down after seeing the prequels, were like, yeah, I'll give it a 3. Like, they weren't super, hot off seeing the movie.
Right. I think the prequels, though, I didn't really realize what I didn't like about them until I had rewatched them when I was older. When I was young, I just knew, I'm like, these aren't really that, there's large chunks of these movies that I want to skip. And that's how you should know that a movie is not that great, is if you want to just skip parts of it, it's probably not very good. Yeah. And it wasn't until I was older when I rewatched them when I was like, oh my god, what happened with these films?
Yeah. The reason I want to watch the prequels with Jen is so that I can have her watch the Red Letter Media review.
Oh my god.
Which is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me.
They just released their Last Jedi review today.
Wow, I have no idea what to expect. Did you watch their Force Awakens one?
Yeah. They liked Force Awakens when it came out, and they really don't like Last Jedi, but I don't like just parroting their stuff. But I think for the prequels they were pretty spot on, but for the I don't necessarily agree with everything they said about the Last Jedi or Force Awakens.
Well, yeah, their prequels ones came out way after the fact, so at least I think they did. Maybe not. Anyway, so they had time to sit on it and figure out exactly what they didn't like about it, which I appreciated, because I think that helped distill a lot of the who is this movie for kind of feelings that we had. A lot of it is boring discussion about trade routes, and then they have Jar Jar stepping in the poopy. So instead of having a movie that's for everyone, you have a movie where everyone watches it and has at least a couple moments where you go, what?
Right. Yeah, the tone is just so inconsistent. It's very bizarre. And it's like, oh, well, they're made for kids. And it's like, okay, well, then why does he kill children?
Yeah, he murders children. It's crazy.
You can't...
I did enjoy Revenge of the Sith. It was dark, and I'm just saying, it wasn't a good movie. I enjoyed that. After watching the first 2 movies, and going and watching Revenge of the Sith, I enjoyed it. In terms of, the action was better. Obi-Wan was, Ewan McGregor did, I think,
a
good job with what he was given.
I don't know. I don't know. Revenge of the Sith had potential, but the action sequences, when they're swinging over the lava after the 15th minute of it, I'm like, Jesus Christ, I'm bored of this.
It became silly.
I don't know, but I agree. I mean, it's like a lot of it is emotionless.
The action sequences.
Yeah, emotionless action, unfortunately.
But just like forcing themselves to walk along. You can just stay in the same place, duel. You don't have to like deliberately walk backwards for along, you know, falling bridges and.
Right. Well, it's like, oh, well, nothing will ever top the lightsaber battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin in Revenge of the Sith. It's like The Force Awakens was like a very, very simple lightsaber duel, and I found it to be monuments better than that. I mean, I think the beginning of the Revenge of the Sith lightsaber fights was really cool because it was like, it was really emotionally charged. They were like really trying to kill each other, and then it just became absurd. I don't know. Now we're getting into prequels. We should wrap this up.
Yeah. Sorry.
That was my fault. I started ranting about it a little bit, but all right. Well, that's our spoiler cast for Star Wars Episode 7: Attack of the Clones. Would recommend. Watch again.
Thanks for all the comments. Good comments in the chat.
Yes, thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week when Brett will be rejoining us. We'll do a retrospect on, well, not next week. Next week's Christmas. The week after that, we'll probably come back and we'll talk about 2017 games in review.
Next week, we're going to come back for the Jayborino DPS podcast Christmas Spectacular.
The Christmas...
Ding, ting, ting-a-ling, ding, ding, ding-a-ling, dong.
Oh my god.
I'll be back in the basement until Brett isn't here and they need me again.
Jen, you can join us.
That's where she lives.
You can come on anytime you want. I don't.
Hell yeah. The Valentine's Day DPS podcast probably be better if you just did it and we were.
I know, right? That one podcast has
Jen
the most views.
Come and do the podcast.
Because I called it Ladies' Night, and it has like twice as many views as any other podcast. It's embarrassing.
You should all be ashamed of yourselves.
Cool. Well, this is the Damage Per Second podcast signing out. Thanks, everybody.